Starting Different with my friend Kirby Martzall. Kirby, I am so excited, and I have yet to have a conversation with you that I don't learn something from, that I don't get inspired by. And in the last 10 minutes, folks, and let me just say what a treat you guys are in for today. Okay, we got 30 minutes, and Kirby has 60 years of wisdom, and we got 30 minutes, Kirby, to summarize your 60 years of wisdom and my 50 years of trying to. Kirby said this just now, folks, before the 5 minutes before. I just want you to think about this phrase. Your brain can't be in the state of knowing and in the state of curiosity at the same time. And I'm gonna have Kirby expand upon that. Every day, folks, we're starting different. And it was Kirby that first shared those two words with me, and a bell went off in my head. And we're going to tell that story here. But I start every one of these sessions by taking a picture of the sunrise. Here was the picture I sent you this morning. Kirby, is it similar to the weather you have up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania?
Unfortunately, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, it's raining.
Every day is a different scenario. The universe won't allow the same folks only growth or decline. It's your choice. And as Kirby wisely said to me in October of last year, you're never starting over, Dino. You're always starting different. So I'm going to have Kirby tell his story today. We're going to tell the story of that message. We're going to tell Kirby's personal story as a professional musician and as a Vistage chair and someone who suffered a very debilitating brain stroke a few years ago. Every person, every project is different, and your story can change, and it can change people's lives. Kirby's story has changed my lives. In order for that to happen, though, you have to recognize those moments of change. And Kirby is going to share with you some questions to ask and some tools to use that he uses with the CEOs he coaches. And there's a thread here. And Kirby, you and I have talked about that. We're both familiar with Dr. Bill Crawford and his work.
Yes.
And I started this series of interviews with Dr. Bill Crawford, who gave us his brain model and how we can eliminate stress in less than 8 seconds. And the N in that model is the word notice. And that's also a link directly to Kirby and Kirby's work. But every single person who I've had on this session has their own story to tell, and that story can change people's lives. So there's someone here, Kirby, there's someone on this call, and the bottom line up front for that person is, what if there was a button you could push in your brain that let you change? What if there was a button? Well, you would hit that button and you would be jamming, Kirby, from one half-assed guitar player to a next. You would be jamming. I say, folks, I play guitar. I could play 100 licks, but I can't play one whole song. And there's people who, are jamming in their own worlds, and the word jamming is, to me, represents the story that Kirby's going to tell. When I interviewed my friend Cujo, Cujo tells a story that changed my life, and he didn't tell it on the interview, and I got to get him back. But it's about how he grounded himself as a commander, wouldn't let himself fly. There's a case study about that story at the Air Force Academy now that Cujo teaches. So I think the word for Cujo is grounded, but the word for Kirby is jamming. So Kirby, let's give a little background here. Let's go back to October 8th, 2019. You and I are both at John Dame's event. John Dame is a wonderful friend of ours, a wonderful Vistage chair, a peer of Kirby's, and he runs an event every year. There was, what do you think, Kirby, about 700 executives there?
Sure, yeah.
And I see Kirby, and we're just going to tell the first part of the story briefly. I see Kirby early in the day, and I walk up to him, and here's how I remember the story. Kirby will tell you whether he remembers it differently. I said, Kirby, I'm so happy to. I said, I'm just curious, man. I know you're a professional guitar player. I know you had this brain stroke. When I am away from playing the guitar and I come back to it, it's frustrating. It feels like I'm starting over. Has it been that same way with you? Do you feel like you're starting over again? And Kirby, do you recall what your answer was?
Dino, it's about starting different.
You said, I still know the chords. I still can read music, but my feel is different than it was. And you said, I wouldn't say better or worse, but it was different. It's different. He said, Dino, you're never starting over, you're starting different. And folks, a bell goes off in my head. And a bell, I can still hear it ringing in my head today, starting different. And I looked at Kirby and I said, that's the title of your book. And Kirby went like this. And now the bell is ringing in both of our heads at the same time. This little music between us. We started jamming, and we're still jamming together a year later, but we started jamming. This giant, he was said to be a giant in the business world, gets up and starts jamming in his own way in front of the audience, in front of 700 people. He denigrates this other author, says, this is a guy who used to work for me, and I don't mind that he took everything, but he left the most important thing out. And then he puts up this book and says, oh, and folks, terrible book, terrible book. Don't read it. And by the way, the author of this book happens to be someone I know. He says, but the cover is why you should look at what I'm showing you. And I sent a text to Keith. I said, what did you do to piss this guy off? But I thought, Kirby, and I said this to you that day, why didn't that person say, the cover of this book is so great, all you have to do is read the cover. And that's what I thought about this concept of starting different. So let's give the background to you now and how you came up with this thought of starting different. Tell the folks what they're seeing here on the screen, because you're not just a half-ass guitar picker like me. I mean, you're a professional musician. What are we looking at up here?
Well, I started playing guitar at age 12. And the black and white was from our first album. I was about 18 years old there. New York City. I had the opportunity to play a couple places in downtown city. Country music in the city was an interesting thing in 1981. So yeah, it's been a while, playing with, fronting with Vanilla Fudge, Allman Brothers, just many really gracious musicians. John Hartford, Vassar Clements, just a string. And
so you had reached
the impressive thing is they were interested in sharing their experiences and sharing the stage. Yeah.
Well, first of all, the thing I want to point out here is you don't get to that level of mastery of an instrument without focus and practice. And you don't get to that level as a band without being able to interact the right ways. And you, I believe, it's interesting because I think there's a very small segment of people that could be successful in professional music. And you still are a live performer. In fact, you were supposed to be performing this weekend, but you're also very successful in the business world. So Kirby, you built 2 businesses, sold them. What year did you first become a Vistage chair? And I think you have three groups now.
2002, 2 groups, correct? Yeah.
2 groups now. So for folks who don't know, Vistage is the largest CEO membership organization in the world, 25,000 members, also the largest speakers bureau. I've been a speaker for 10 or 12 years for Vistage, and I've spoke for Kirby's groups. That's how we first met. But Kirby follows a process with his teams, with his CEOs. He runs what he now refers to as scenario discovery sessions to allow them to address different scenarios they're in. But Kirby, let's go to 2010. Tell us what happens in 2010 with the brain stroke, and tell us how this concept of starting different first came to you.
Yeah, January 4, 2010, in my mind was planned to be a normal day, but it didn't turn out that way. And I was in the shower, and I didn't notice very much, but it was a little bit different. And Joan, my wife, immediately knew from her work with special needs children and adults that something was off. So I did go to the hospital in the emergency room, and I will tell you, if you need to get through the emergency room quickly, just say you're having a stroke. Boy, you get immediate attention. But the point is that for 14 days in the hospital, it gave me an opportunity to consider what to do next. And certainly,
what do you mean by that, Kirby? What do you mean an opportunity to consider?
Well, there's a space of 14 days, and I was down to maybe 1 or 2 words and a phrase on January 4th. And so as I was kind of starting the process of getting some of my faculties back, the executive function of the brain back, it became a choice, of what to do. And I think starting over was just so overwhelming that it caused me to consider something different, because I wanted to recover. I didn't want to just stay in whatever state I was in. And it just hit me that the concept of starting different, just like I know the chords, I know the whatever. Well, I did have, fortunately, the ability that my physical control was fine. And my thinking was for the most part fine, but I couldn't express. And so starting different from my autopilot of, what do you want me to talk about? Let's go, to I need to actually really think through stuff, had me the opportunity over the next couple of years, and I think even now, 10 years after, the opportunity to rewire my brain at age 57, now 67. That's a rare gift to do
It's
that.
it's a rare person who can create the framing around that kind of an event as a gift. And I just want to put this in a little bit of perspective. This is Memorial Day weekend, but it's not going to be the same as any other Memorial Day weekend. Every single one of you are starting different, and some of us way more than others. We're all on this journey, but we're on different boats as we're going through this journey. And I wanted to share. I mean, Kirby went through hell, and there's a book that my mom just sent me, a wonderful book from a rabbi out in California. And he talks about framing these moments of change. But here's the quote: "We all walk through hell. The point is to not come out empty-handed." So Kirby, what would you say you came out of that moment, that time period? What would you say you came out holding that you can help the world with?
I think a couple things. One is that recovery is a choice. And when you choose to recover, you're really putting yourself out for a steep climb, and things that will take you into your lack of comfort zone, to discomfort zone, to no way zone. On the other hand, the brain is a phenomenal thing, and it is able to be rewired. And therefore, I learned that with repetition and practice and framing and focus, that there really is that ability to incrementally shift.
So let's go back to the quote I started with, which was something new that I learned from you in the 5 or 6 minutes before the call, that the brain can't be in the state of knowing and the state of curiosity at the same time. In your coaching with CEOs, these are folks who are very intuitive, but they may not be counterintuitive. And this is a point you were sharing with me earlier. What's the important part of shifting them into curiosity?
Well, a couple things. They're actually paid to know. And therefore, the system, the life, everything is rigged for them to have the answer. The reality is, we usually know we don't know. We sometimes don't know we don't know. And we sometimes really overestimate that we know what we know. And
Right.
therefore, if you can shift to curiosity, then that allows you to be curious, obviously, and ask how and
Yeah.
why and why.
Well, I think one of the things that you and I share, and not just the music, but I think we would both call ourselves seekers in a certain way. And
Yeah.
I've been that way my whole life. I'm just curious, and I'm seeker of knowledge, of information. I dive in and I look for little diamonds. And that's why, I had a conversation with Alan Hauge, another Vistage chair, just a few weeks ago. And Alan Hauge said something in that call. And I said, Alan, that's your book. Okay. I mean, this stuff just rings. So the first thing is to reframe the situation. And I'm going to go through that acronym that I just showed you guys in a minute. What is the situation? What are the implications? And what are you going to do next? But you're also a big believer in the word practice.
Yes.
And also that most companies and most professionals don't practice. So an interesting quote in the preparation this week, you said, well, you asked me, Dino, how many games does a football team play? And you asked the wrong guy. I said,
In a
I give
week.
up. I said, I give up. I give up. I said, but I do know this. Every musician practices if they want to get better. And you said the only guarantee when you practice is that you'll make mistakes. So talk about practice and how you see that in a business environment and why you think that's important for rewiring for CEOs and their teams.
Yeah, the only guarantee is that you're going to make mistakes, and there is not a guarantee that you're going to learn. Again, that's a choice in the framing of learning for mastery from the start. The point about practice versus performance and business and CEOs, many times we're performing all the time, every meeting, every call, every presentation, whatever. And we don't allow the space to practice, and that requires a safe practice space and place. And therefore, we limit ourselves because it many times is not safe, and therefore it's counterintuitive to put yourself into harm's way as an ego, as an executive, as a leader. However, when you do that, everything starts to work just a little bit better.
Yep. So it's interesting because this was the big thing that jumped out at me in Cujo's book when I first read it. Robert Cujo Teschner, who's a F-22 commander, fighter pilot, and led the Air Force's debrief instructional component.
It's just a very
Solid guy. Solid guy, and I only have solid people on, Kirby, which is with me here. So, but one of the things that Cujo brought up was this concept of psychological safety, in that a fighter pilot has to feel safe to talk about, to debrief what happened on a flight. And in fact, when I sat next to the head of flight safety for what used to be US Air and interviewed him once, he said, the most important thing we've ever done in America for flight safety is make it so that pilots are safe to come forward when a mistake happens, because we want to learn from it. So 4 kinds of safety, folks, if you're reading this, and there's a number of books you could read if you just type in the word psychological safety, but I'm really enjoying Timothy Clark's work. 4 kinds of safety. Number 1, safe to be included in whatever group this is. And what I'm going to have you do, if you would, Kirby, I'm going to have you talk about your dojo concept. Safe to be included, safe to learn, safe to contribute, and the highest form of safety is to challenge. So what I would say to some of the CEOs on the phone or friends who are going through, change programs with their organ or even with their family, if your employees feel safe to challenge, that's a good sign of quality leadership, But talk to us about this dojo concept.
Yeah, well, and it certainly is not an original concept. It comes from martial arts, and a dojo, in my framing, and a dojo experience is a safe practice space and a learning place. And therefore, how do you create that over time with a group of executives or any group of people in a way that they feel safe? And you establish fundamentals and you live by them. And one of the biggest things that I have found to be effective is the commitment to each other, not to me as the leader of the group. That's nice, but that is far less helpful than a commitment to each other as the group, as the executive group, as the manager group, as the family. One of the strongest ties in families is commitment to each other. Strong tie in community in the tribe. Commitment to each other.
This leads me to the next word you brought up, which is the word notice, and it brings me to a member of your tribe who you said, I'm going to show the picture here, who you say is maybe the one who notices better than you. So,
it helps me learn.
Let me introduce the audience to Ying, this beautiful dog. So tell us about Ying and tell us about why the way Ying processes the world around him resonates with you.
Well, he's hardwired as an Australian Shepherd to be alert and to notice and scan all the time, and then sometimes make the right decision, sometimes not. But he's built to be aware, and he's built to notice, and he uses more senses. I mean, he just uses more senses than we usually do as human beings. But we have that ability. We just have dumbed them down. We've turned them off. And so many times I'm asking the question, when you had that conversation, what did you notice? What did you notice in your body? Where was the stress? Where was the posture? What did you notice in the other people? When you were talking, what did they express? What did you see? What did they see? That kind of thing. How'd you show up? So noticing is a practice point.
Well, and I know that none of this stuff may sound like a secret to anyone, but the point is that these little things are big things, and Vistage to some people seems like a secret society. It sure did to me when I first, I didn't know whether it was called tech, the executive committee, or who the heck knows what it was called. And there were all these people, and there were all these people meeting in private, and everything is secret till you know it. And one of the things that is clear to me is the more we can make things that normally seem invisible visible, whether it's through models or tools and what we teach, the more we can be helpful to people. And Vistage has two processes. Well, I'll have you describe, Kirby, what is an issue processing session, and how does that differ from what you and I don't know if it's many Vistage chairs, but I believe it probably is, this concept of scenario discovery. Talk to us about the difference and how they both apply to CEOs who are facing change.
Issue processing, when it's effective, is really identifying an issue. And in the groups I lead, we try to frame it as, how do I? How do I do this? How do I do that? And then we ask clarifying questions, restate what the issue is, if it has been restated, and then make suggestions, and then ask the member, what did you hear? What did you notice? And what are the things that you're going to do or considering doing, etc., and then what you're going to apply.
So let me pause here. So for folks who have never been to a Vistage meeting, imagine 12 to 15 CEOs around a room, or key executives, because Kirby has a key executive group as well, who aren't CEOs but report to a CEO. Imagine 12 people who are in non-competitive businesses with you, who you are not vendors or suppliers to you, and have only one intention: to help you be all you can be a better leader, to get, to make better decisions, to achieve better results. And so that's an issue processing session, which, I've experienced hundreds of them in my time as a Vistage member and in my time as a Vistage speaker. And it's incredibly powerful. How does that differ from a scenario discovery session and the kinds of conversations you're having during this COVID crisis?
Correct. Yeah. So the scenario discovery is my framing of issue processing. Like most of you, you're feeling probably overwhelmed, or at least you have enough stuff on your plate that you don't need one more quote unquote issue. So I encourage the group to say, let's do scenario discovery. What is possible? What has potential? And then what is probable? Identify that, and then do a discovery, like a scenario design, and then discover how that scenario would unfold and how it looks from a cause and effect standpoint. It surfaces issues while you're doing it, but the framing of scenario means that it's more strategic, and it really is very action-oriented operationally at the same time. And this time gives people that opportunity.
Well, the key is the questions you ask, right? And the answers sometimes are uncertain. People are uncomfortable with uncertainty. I went through a 6-month period with 30 different eye surgeries where I didn't know if I was going to ever see again, right? And going through that kind of uncertainty is a huge gift. And it's the same kind of uncertainty I'm sure you went through. But here's what I know: when people don't know something, we think of that as ignorance. And the phrase is ignorance is sin. But I think of ignorance as not knowing, and not knowing causes people to be anxious and fearful. And what we know about the brain is when people are anxious or fearful, the brain sees that as danger. So right now, people are going into fight, flight, freeze, and sometimes dozens of times during the day. I would give you guys 3 questions in addition to the ones that Kirby has just shared with you. So if you write down the word sin, next to situation, write what is, Next to implication, write so what? And next to the word next, write what's next. Now in each of these, there would be two more questions. So in what is the situation, what do you know? What don't you know? Get it all out on paper in front of you. So what is the next question? What do you want to have happen? What do you fear might happen? Get it all out, and we're going to talk about why getting it all out is so important in the last couple of minutes here. But then the last question, what's next? What are you going to do, and what do you need others to do? So I've followed this issue processing scenario discovery process with people in my family for years. Here was a document I created with my daughter when she had a decision about, and Kirby, as you know, she's been interning with Universal Music in the music industry, and was managing Lady Gaga's social media account, part of that team. But there were things she didn't know about 3 different co-ops she had, and I said, I'm going to walk you through these 2 co-ops. What do you know? What do you not know? We're going to ask then, what are the implications of that? What do you want? What do you fear? And then what do you want to have happen next? And by the end of the issue processing, we were here, right? She had discovered different potential scenarios. This is the kind of work I sense that you do with your clients. And we all have to do it, folks, if we want to get better. And Kirby knows this story about my own decision to move down here to Florida. 2 years ago in September, I woke up on a Wednesday. My daughter had been away at school, Kirby, and I realized she wasn't coming back. As a single dad, that was it. She was loving it and doing great, and that's success. But I woke up and I realized I hadn't spoken to anyone in 3 days, and I didn't have anything on the schedule to speak to anyone for the next 3 days. Does that sound familiar to anyone living through COVID? And I wept. I actually looked in the mirror and wept, and I said, this is not a good look for a motivational speaker. So that was my moment in life to say, what am I going to do different? And I actually drew a map. Folks, here's what you need to know. The brain processes visuals 30 times faster than words. So get your thoughts out on a map. Write down what you believe is possible. Write down the patterns. Think about the scenarios that are happening at the beginning and end of every day. Moments of power, moments of choice when you might be getting triggered now. So I'm going to skip through all this because Kirby, we're right at the 30 minutes. And I just want to say, I want to give you a chance to offer up to folks any last thoughts about how they might create some different patterns, how they might identify ways to move forward through this. You made a decision to become better, to get better. And organizations are constantly focused on that themselves. And every single day, they're doing the work. So any additional thoughts, Kirby, anything that we left out that you would like people to hear? Because I try to keep these sessions to the 30-minute mark, and we're right about at 29 and a half.
Well, consider the fact that practice is important. You learn and you have fun with it. And shift is incremental. Shift in your thinking, shift in your behavior. Do that. That is a shift in how you do and you're doing. You see those patterns, and then ultimately you shift your being as a person, you shift your culture as an organization. That's what developmental culture is all about. Have fun with it, breathe, and be gentle with yourself on this stuff.
So if Kirby made a generous offer, because he is in this world to make a difference, and so am I. Kirby would like to offer, if anyone would like to reach out and connect, here's his email address, kirby@klmartzall.com. Kirby does this for a living, folks, and his life has led him to this point. I have never had an interaction with Kirby without coming out better for it. And Kirby, I know that you do these discovery calls. If someone would like to have one with you, you've offered to have them reach out and schedule that, correct?
Yes, that is correct, Dino, and thank you very much. The feeling is mutual. We learn together, and boy, that makes us both stronger. I very much enjoy our conversations.
As do I, man. So every day is a chance to start different. And what we're going through now, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was what we made of it. Kirby, I'm going to be closing up in a couple of seconds, but remember what Kirby said about incremental improvement. Folks, here's how the math works. Improve 1% a day, that's it. And in 70 days, you're twice as good as you are now. We're never starting over. We're always starting different. Kirby, I'm going to wish you a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Cheers,
Stay safe.
folks. Have a great
Be
day.
well.
You too, brother. You too, brother.